For clarity, before we do start, is that Patricia Quinn, Kate O'Mara, or Bonnie Langford, or is it one?
It could be any of them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking About Who, and we are this week talking about season 24. This is part 1, so you can gather we're going to do 2 stories in this first half. I am P-Bal, and joining me this week, as always, are...
Hello, I'm Mel, or otherwise known as James.
Hi, and I'm Jason.
I was hoping Mel, otherwise known as Melanie.
James, where did you get that from? Honestly, man, that's awful.
I nicked it.
We don't want your Saturday night exploits being debated here.
Anyway, I'm thrilled to have Tabby and Tilda on cam with me, but we are actually starting this week, obviously, with Time and the Rani. Who wants to kick off on Time and the Rani?
Well, we get it all in this starter for the starter of the season here, don't we? Regeneration, the Rani, we get Sherlock's mum, we get dodgy wigs, as modelled by our very own James.
What are you trying to say?
And we get a story of strange matter, but there ain't not a quark to be seen in sight. It's an odd story, Time and the Rani. We've talked at length a couple of times about opening stories to a new Doctor. And this isn't any different, but for a number of different ways for me, because I think that Sylvester didn't have the easiest of starts with this particular story. I think that he's come in at a bit of a troubled time. This wasn't really a story that was written for him, and he struggles a little bit, in my opinion, just as we start this story, to find his feet. But I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go through it. But it's an interesting start to the season, and I'm sure we'll say a little bit more about Pip and Jane Baker's script as we go through this.
He says himself on the Blu-rays that he was never given any direction on how to be the Doctor, and you can kind of see that in this story. He very much relies on his sort of performance skills. You know, he does a lot of tumbling. He plays the spoons. There's a lot of sort of gibberish talking. You know, there are moments when you're just like, what is he doing? But for me, this story is that we talked before about stories that we grew up with or we went to school with, and sort of the McCoy era was when I was at school. It was when most of my friends at school were watching Doctor Who at this time. So I have a sort of nostalgia versus reality of what the stories are really like. And I found this season really difficult to review honestly, because part of me is still the sort of, you know, the school kid who was like, yeah, it's Doctor Who, it's back, and it's got new titles, and it's, you know, it's all jazzed up, and we've got a new Doctor. And another part is me like, some of the scripts, some of the like in this one with Sylvester, some of the acting isn't quite, you know, top notch, shall we say? And that sounds really harsh, because I do genuinely like the season, but it's not a standout one, because I think compared to the later seasons with McCoy, where the stories got better, and, you know, you got the slightly darker Doctor, you had more mystery, you had a more established relationship with Ace. Those stories, and I know we've already talked about some of those stories, I really like. This is kind of a teaser for what it could be, but it's not quite there, if that makes sense.
I think I'm going to be willing to disagree with you all, obviously. I think Sylvester, he's quite bumbly. He is trying to find his feet here, but he hits it. I think he hits it quite quickly. I don't think it's as erratic as Colin's start. Colin's still trying to bump Perry off a fortnight in. At least Sylvester's, you know, it is kind of like he's on it, and then he's meant to be off it because he's been drugged by the Rani, and, you know, I get that he probably wasn't given that sort of direction. So this is the plan. This is where we're going. But no, I think that there's some nice touches, and there's lots of little nods along the way, like when he he actually does murder the Tetrap. I mean, you can't really argue that he doesn't push him into that, and then he's a bit surprised that it kills him and doffs his hat. And I don't. It's quite a nice little touch. But I don't think there are actually any bad. I mean, there's not. This can't be said for all stories this season, but actually, I don't think there are any bad performances in Time of the Rani. I'd be intrigued as to who you don't like performance-wise, because I think actually everybody in this, I think, is on it. I mean, we'll come back to Kate, because I think Kate needs her own discussion, but Wanda and Donald give so much reverence to this. They are dressed up like giant lizard people with Edinburgh Woolen Mill sort of things, but it's like they don't show that this is a bit weird looking. They play it.
I have to agree with you on this. Apart from the shaky start, and I think that comes down to, I think we're right, the lack of direction, because you're quite right. Sylvester finds his feet. By the end of the story, he's found it. By the next story, he's beginning to own it, and so on and so forth. And I'll relate to that as we come through the different stories. But you couldn't have asked for a better cast. The problem I think you've got with this story is the script just doesn't deliver. You put it under scrutiny, you have a look at it, and it's pretty poor. Andrew Morgan, he does his best. But he's defeated by two things in this story. It's not his cast he's got with him, because I think he's got a brilliant cast, and we'll talk about them in a bit more detail. It's the fact that he's fighting a poor script, in my opinion, and he's also fighting new technology that nobody really knows how to use. So they're trying to bring all this new special effects in, and the effects are dictating the way he's directing the story, I think.
I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, from my opening piece, I don't dislike this story. And there are, we will talk about Kate tomorrow, because her performance is just brilliant. And there is a brilliant, I've watched this a number of times, and it's one of those episodes you can watch with friends, because you just, it's really camp. It's really, there are moments which are really funny. And it's just a joy to watch. But there are things, I slightly agree with Jason with what he just said. There are like the Doctor's mixing up of sayings, of proverbs or whatever else. I find, for me, I'm like, I don't know why that happens. And then it kind of disappears. And then when I was watching the Delta and the Bannerman, it comes back. It sort of disappears for an episode, and then it comes back in Delta and the Bannerman. I'm like, well, what? Why? Did they think that was going to be the, Sylvester's calling card, was he was just going to mix up phrases? So there are a few things that I question. There are a few things that are just wonderfully tongue-in-cheek, like Le Hargill and things like that, which you just like, okay, I get the joke, it's fine. It is fun, but for me, there are better McCoy stories, but it's not. I know there was lots of issues, and I know it was written for Colin, and they had to really adapt it. And Sylvester himself says he struggled on this first one. It shows promise. It shows that there's great stories to be told. Like I say, I struggle with that. I loved it because it's nostalgic and it's camp, versus is it a terribly well written, well thought out story? Maybe not, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy watching it.
I don't get the hate on the script either. I literally there's lots of really. I think the Rani is written so well as well. Her barbs. Is I have enough dealing with your incompetence without having to listen to your puerile opinions, which is something I'm taking forward in life as something I can use to people. It's just kind of like. I like that. She's very strongly written. I think. Inevitably, I think you do get the kind of the tech stuff, the tech science. I think we'll call it, which is sci-fi science, and it's fine. I think inevitably, if you're dealing with a show that's based around, a face-changing 1,000-year-old alien that travels in a police box, the big one, you can't honestly hold too hard on the scientific front. I mean, there are a few holes if you do dig deep. The Lacurtian in slavery by the Rani, she managed it on her own with a handful of bats, and I don't know.
And some killer bees.
And some killer bees, the killer bees. There are a few, and also it did sort of strike me, and perhaps you shouldn't even question these things too hard, as to quite what I can't remember Mark Greenstreet's going, what is he doing? He's sort of watching, and then he's just going to look outside the Rani's headquarters, but then his mum and Wanda Venter and Dog, they can come and go. So it's kind of like, you can sort of get in there, but you can also not get in. Mel comes and goes quite freely. It's all a bit kind of like, there are things like that where you think you're struggling to get in here, but you can get in. But no, I think the thing with Pip and Jane is you're probably not, I mean, they're Doctor Who's, and I used to love What on Earth. If you don't like, you're not going to get something gloriously textured and layered, maybe, but I think you'll get professional and fun. And I think the thing that strikes me about Time in the Rani as a whole is having having quite recently watched Trial of a Time Lord. Trial of a Time Lord feels like it's Doctor Who's sort of petering. It feels like we don't think this is going to make it to Christmas, let alone New Year. Whereas from admittedly the slightly now dated opening CGI, at the time, it feels fresh. I mean, that episode 1, it's camp, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's fresh and it comes at you, and it's like this, we want to be here and we want to be doing this.
Yeah, and that's what I say. It shows so much promise of what Doctor Who can be like. I question, and I'll be interested in your views on this, about how Mel is in, for example, Terror of the Vervoids, to how Mel is in this story. Because she screams a lot in this story. I mean, obviously she's stuck in the tech trap, and there's lots of comments about how much she screams. I don't know whether or not I see them as quite different. The Mel in Terror of the Vervoids is a bit plucky, a bit sort of, I'm going to go off on an adventure on my own and climb into ducks and stuff. And this Mel is a lot of screaming and running around a quarry in white jeans.
But when you scream at something big and hairy, went at you.
No comment.
She does get a lot of her own gigs really in this season, in this story as well. She's off doing her own thing. She is quite I think she's in the thick of the action. She's not just stood by the side of the Doctor screaming away. Yeah, she does scream a lot when she's caught in that bubble, and she does show a little bit of that sort of weakness there. But I think actually she's one of the outstanding pieces in this season, because she's given a chance to shine in all the scripts, and I think she takes it. And be honest, watching back, I wasn't a huge Mel fan when I watched Doctor Who at this particular stage in the run, but my opinion of Bonnie's portrayal of Mel has changed completely over the years, to the point where I think she's a very credible companion, and absolutely deserves her place on the roll call of companions in Doctor Who.
If you sat through, and obviously I haven't, 500 hours of studio footage, Bonnie suffered for her art. All I'm saying is she suffered, and she did not complain. And that's on the interest. I mean, I was slightly dubious about whether you should see the workings of the studio, but there are a few times she's like, okay, again, with the screaming,
yeah.
And off she goes, and you could just see that, by take sort of 7, where it's like, can we just reset? We're going to redo this and you're like, poor thing.
Her voice sounds quite her voice sounds strained in some of the scenes, because she's been screaming for hours while they did all these takes.
So I alluded to them. What do we think of the tet traps?
Oh, see, I've got my little my little tet trap. They're interesting. I quite the eye, the eye movement. It seems a bit strange that they're sort of like looking in one direction then the other. But I think I'm not surprised they've not really become a regular sort of alien. But I think they serve their purpose in this story.
In what way do they serve their purpose in this story? Just out of interest.
just as I quite like the towards the end when he hears the Mara's the Rani's plan, and she's like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to blow up the planet, and they all get on board her TARDIS and capture her. I think there's from that point of view, they are her slaves, but they end up having a bit of a revolt and taking over. I think there's enough of the character for you to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand that it's the henchman, but actually this henchman's got their own ideas of, he's very toady. He's like, oh yes, mistress, and blah blah blah, and then at the end plots against her. So I think from that point of view, they've got a nice little story arc in the story.
They do, but they're a bit generic.
Yeah.
They could have been any alien who have been subservient. I mean, the Ogrons were subservient. We've had a whole feast of them over the years. They're a little bit forgettable for me and just a bit generic, and therefore not a shining point in this story.
Not even the tongue?
Sure, I love the tet trap design. I think they look great. I like the eye thing because that's not something that they they often do. So I like that there's an attempt to. Not quite sure what the point is and why sometimes you can see through them. And anyway, and I always think Richard Gauntlet gives an amazing performance underneath all of that because I think he gets a character through, and I think we've sort of discussed that a few times. Of getting a character through a mask of some description. I think he does a great job convincing that he's not just a guy in a suit. But I mean, obviously, I think if you got to say the star of the show is Kate. I think she does own it, and you get to the end of it, and you're just like, I'm kind of gutted that they know. I mean, Dimensions in Time, the greatest Doctor Who story ever aside.
No, it's not. Is it really?
It is the greatest. It's the most epic thing ever put on British television.
I'm not sure how I haven't picked that up before in any of our conversations that we've had.
No.
Well, maybe you need to go on a journey, a very long journey. Yeah. Why? You just think? Why didn't you come back?
Oh, woefully absolutely. I mean, as a returning villain, she needed to. I mean, to be honest with you, bring her back every season. I would not have got bored of Kate O'Mara coming back season after season and being as devilish and as camp as she was in this role. She brings an energy. She brings that real star quality. Every time you see her on screen, she owns it. I mean, she's in the first part of this story, she is dressed up as Mel, wearing a wig, and she belting it, absolutely belting it out. She's superb in this.
It's not just what I find just mesmerizing. It's not just the wig and the outfit. It's not even the voice. She does that voice as well, but it's her whole physicality, her body language, the way she moves. Because Bonnie's a dancer, and you can see, when she's being carried. After she gets sort of paralyzed and her legs start kicking, and it's all very dancey, it's all very choreographed, and what you see is Kate do exactly the same. Kate sort of has the same body movements as her, in part. So it's not just a performance of voice and costume and everything else. There's a physicality to it, which I just think is brilliant. I just think that she really throws herself at this. And from what I was reading before when I was looking at these episodes. She asked to come back. She was like, I really just want to come back and do some more. And it just comes across, she's just having fun. You know, I for that reason, I love this episode, because her performance is amazing.
But you watch her turn that character. She walks across the set, and she's the Rani on one side of the room. By the time she's reached the Doctor, you've watched her whole body almost change into Mel. She morphs into Mel, into the character. And that is the sign of a true actress.
Even her face when she goes, cretin, like that, and then she's back to Mel. She just like, she drops the facade for a moment and just goes, cretin. And then the face goes back to, all right, Doctor, it's just brilliant.
I think I could do a few Kate stories here, but I'm not going to. But what I will say is that we did a signing once, and someone came up to, as often people do say things at the table, which they probably slightly regret as soon as they start saying it. And this guy came up to us and said, do you know who I think would make a great Rani? Charlie Brooks. And Kate looks at him and said, do you know who I think would make a great Rani? Me. Done. Oh, yeah. No, she and again, I mean, I suppose tastes may vary, but I think she's the right pitch on the heightened camp scale of things, which is why she sort of devours the Master and the Mark of the Rani. But we'll come to that, I'm sure, at some point.
Oh yes, we will.
Would you have preferred to have seen more of Kate and less of Anthony, do you think, each season? Or do you think
it's difficult because
both of them to come side by side and be in a season on their
I don't think I would have wanted to see them side by side again, because I really like his performance in Survival. I think as the sort of damaged Master who's a bit older and a little bit more in control. But I could have quite happily have seen the Rani come back, you know, at some point. She's an unusual one, whereas the Master's trying to just take over the universe and, you know, is against the Doctor. The Rani isn't necessarily, you know, have a vendetta against the Doctor. She has her own agenda and what she wants to do, and it's very different. And I like that dynamic as well, because they can be like really, you know, not close friends, but they can be very sort of, you know, Time Lord to Time Lord. They can communicate, but then she has her agenda and the Doctor's like, oh, I'm going to have to stop you. Whereas the Master is very much like, I want to kill the Doctor and take over the universe. And I think that sometimes get a little bit one-dimensional, whereas the Rani isn't, you know, it's a little bit more complex.
She's amoral, isn't she, rather than evil?
She is.
It's when things get in the way of her experiment or whatever she's trying to do that the ethics. There's the thing is, do you question when you bite into a lamb chop? Is that this episode or the last one? I don't know.
She's trying to bring the dinosaurs back, isn't she? She's trying to...
Adric bumped them off, so it's only fair. She's basically clearing up what the Doctor caused as a problem, isn't she, really? So she's kind of like the good guy in this. So I think have we been over Mark Greenstreet? I mean, is hot. We'll just leave that one out. Have we covered all bases? Do we think on the top?
I mean,
hang on. Have we got facts?
No.
Well, the Quark's supposed to be in this one.
The Quarks were supposed to be in this one. Yeah. So for me, a couple of things. We haven't talked about the regeneration at the beginning, which on the Blu-ray they've now put Colin in. So it's I don't know whether you prefer that or you prefer the old Sylvester sort of gets pulled around with a dodgy blonde wig. But they've superimposed Colin in. You know, there are just the Lacurtian running as well.
Lacurtian running's a nice little subtle thing.
It is a little,
the hands back thing, lizardy.
There are lots of little touches in this that I really like. You know, it's quite quotable as well. You know, the giant brain. Which is a bit odd, but you know, I get it. You know, there's some really nice things in this. So yeah,
the bubble traps. I don't suppose we quite mention those. Oh, whilst they don't make entire sense, they look great. I love them.
They do.
It's Clifford's frowning.
Well, it comes back to that technology thing again. They were really trying to bring the technology out, and they do work. I mean, they're kind of good, but I think I've just unfortunately associate Bonnie screaming all the time when she's inside one. So
she's about to die. She's about to get blown up. She's not going to be writing a postcard.
You were like, this is the first episode, and Bonnie's going to get blown up against the side of a cliff. It's just. Like...
I mean, lest we forget Terror of the Vervoids, where she had to scream in key for quite some time to hit the end credits.
Yes, no, we must never forget that. I think we've talked about it as well, haven't we?
We have.
What about the new titles, of course, and Kev McCulloch's theme debut here for this one?
I'm a fan. I have to say, I am a fan. I know it has its critics, and certainly the title sequence with the three rocks. It looks like it's really bad 3D. You should be wearing a pair of glasses. I loved seeing Peter Davis's reaction to the wink in the titles when I was watching the Blu-ray, because he was like, "Oh, why is he winking?" But I like that, and as you were saying, Paul, it was like it's back and it's brand new and it's fresh and exciting, and the titles and the music really, compare that to Colin's Technicolor thing, which was quite sort of I'm not a massive fan of the Colin Baker titles. This is something completely different, and I liked it.
Yeah, I think
I like the title sequence. I like the arrangement of the theme. The incidental music in this one, I find, is quite annoying.
Wait till we get to some other stories.
Although I think the incidentals work in some of the other stories. For me, the titles were a fresh take, I think. And after the Starfield, which had been there for a few years, was getting a little bit tired. We were just literally having a superimposed Doctor's face over it and a bit of sprinkle every time we had a different actor in the role. I think it was nice that they pulled out the stops and did a new title sequence. And I was a fan of it at the time. I wasn't a fan of what it did to the Target novels when they used to literally just carve that logo across the top third of a page and then just have some sort of illustration underneath it. So I didn't like it for that reason, but I did like it on screen. And I think Kev McCulloch's incidentals, whilst not perfect in this story, I do think they add a new feel to the show.
It's worth noting for the Ledger that as a 5-year-old P-Bal, this is the first Doctor Who story I can remember watching.
Wow. Okay.
So I could remember it being a very scary story with evil bat creatures in the dark in a cave. That's what I could remember of this, and vaguely the bouncing thing. So those are the memories as 5, but so that's what I took from it. And it's quite funny because with generationally, it's that thing, isn't it? So when I became a sort of fully fledged fan, as 12 years on, I didn't realize quite how hated this thing that I could remember watching as a child and being scared of, how hated by fans who'd grown up and been 5 when the Yeti were on the Underground and had since decreed which ones people should like or not like. And then I think the sort of funny thing, I suppose, to keep rambling on, is that now it's almost 30 years, something like that. It's gone full circle again in some ways, and so the kids that sort of started watching with Eccleston, kids, I'm so patronising, now don't have that baggage, and they come at it and they're like, "Oh God, season 24, love it," and they haven't got the baggage of being told in the 90s what was good or what wasn't good. This
would actually be your Genesis then, because if we go back to that conversation where I was 5 watching that, my memories of Genesis spin all the way back there. So I can understand what you're saying. Your first Doctor Who is something that is actually quite personal and will live with you. So yeah, so I can understand your feelings about the story.
But will it be too early?
Ooh. This could be a hashtag justice for Tam and the Rani coming up here.
No, I think whilst I have got the that little warm glow of the remembrance, so to speak, I'm not blinded to the faults of this story. So Have we got no more facts, James? No more
No, nothing.
unsubstantiated
Nothing
rumours that you've read on a forum?
No.
He's
You're
never
gonna
going to live
have
the
to. I
quiet
have
down,
to
is he?
explain. So for anyone who's watching this, going, "What on earth?" So if you've not seen our live review of the Five Doctors, you may spot quite a few references to quarks during these episodes. That's all I'm saying.
Hashtag spoilers.
Yes.
It might make no sense to anyone, but suffice to say, someone I think has made the fact about quarks being in Five Doctors. But we shall move on to scoring. And are we going to go for James or Jason first?
I don't mind going first on this one because I think I've been fairly straight. I think in the way that I've talked about this story, this is a very interesting season for me because it's a season that gets progressively better and better as you travel through it. So this for me is the weaker of the 4 stories that we're going to talk about in this season. I think that Sylvester lands. It's an interesting phase through, but by the end, I think he's nailed it. It's got the most amazing K.O. Mara in it, so I'm always going to give it a little point or two for that. But for me, I'm gonna have to say this. It's let down by the script, and it is let down for me a little bit with the direction and the way that it travels when it's too reliant on technology. The story's great. It's got a great guest cast. However, I have to be very fair with where I'm coming with this. So my score for Time and the Rani, stand by, haters will be hating, but standing by, my score for Time and the Rani is 5.
Ooh.
I love how P-Bal looks like he's just stepped on a piece of Lego barefoot.
I've just stepped on a Dapple Tat Trap, an anniversary play set a year early. My 5-sided console.
This score than ever.
My 5-sided console has never been more upset.
Oh.
So what score are we going for, James?
Oh, so this is a rare occasion where I think my heart is going to override my head in this score because this is coming into the nostalgia seasons for me, similar to you. Is sort of first Doctor Who was watching at school. Oh, I'm going to say it. Leave the girl. It's the 8 I want.
The ape I want. I was like, that's a preference, isn't it? 8 points.
8 points, yeah.
I feel like when they have the Eurovision and 8 points.
8 points for England. Yeah.
So 8 points. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great fresh launch to start, a fresh launch to the series. It's bright, it's pacey. I like the style. It feels like a new show from the previous year. It feels like it wants to be there. It's not a classic. I think I'd have to go some hog to say it's a classic. So I am giving Time and the Rani 7.
Okay.
A solid 7.
Solid 7.
It's a good 7 then if it's a solid 7.
Which gives Time and the Rani 20 points overall. Is that more than Genesis? Because it should be. We move on to the second story of season 24, and we are off to Paradise Towers. So who fancies a dip in the pool?
Okay, I will start with Paradise Towers then. So what?
I'm just seeing your quark in the background.
I don't know what you mean. So I will start. Did you not know they were originally going to be the cleaners? Anyway.
Wait, your wig could also double up as a resi.
It could.
It's a
I told
versatile
you
look.
it's multifunctional, this wig. It was well worth the £3 I spent on it. Right, Paradise Towers. I'm going to start with the cast because the cast for this is brilliant. You've got Richard Briers, who, it was the late 80s. He was pretty much, on a lot of stuff on TV, big name to cast. You've got Clive, Elizabeth Spriggs, Brenda Bruce, Judy Cornwell. So many sort of, really recognizable faces in this. And this is the story that I think scared me most when I was young. And, the scene in the pool where sort of, finally get to the pool and Mel gets attacked by that sort of, cleaner sort of droid thing. I think the thing is, when you watch it as an adult, the cleaners don't look very scary. They look like they're made out of Duplo. But when you're a child and you're watching this and you see an old lady taken through the waste disposal unit, or you see, just a leg sticking out of the back of one of the cleaners as it sort of goes away, there's a lot of sort of horror, which is you don't see. It's kind of suggested. And I think as a kid, it really taps into children's imagination that these cleaners are going, floor by floor, killing people with a claw and a drill. And as an adult, you sort of don't necessarily feel the same way. But I think as a child, it was kind of like, wow, that's quite sort of dark. You've got the Kangs, which again, as a child, you sort of relate to these younger people that are running around the towers, like you would have when you were a kid running around the local park or whatever else. So you have that identity with them, that they're more like you, and then suddenly you've got these old biddies who are eating them. So again, there's a lot in this which is quite dark, which as a younger person watching it, it's quite scary. I find this story is much more on the macabre side, which is good. I like that.
I just before we head to Jason, I concur that as a little 5-year-old, Paul, there was one very cute, very scared of cleaners and the sort of urban setting, because it's very kind of tower block, very realistic for sort of 80s Britain, I suppose, that kind of vibe. Not sure I agree with everything else, but let's see what Jason's got to say.
Okay, I mean, I've got to say, I've already said, for me, Time of the Rani in this season is the lower of the scale, and I think the scale starts to climb as we come through it. Stephen Wyatt's debut script, without question, is a blinder, and it offers a dystopian view to life in the high rises. Now you've got Kangs, caretakers, the fabulously creepy Tabby and Tilda, and some good reasons not to use a communal swimming pool. But I think this is a bloody good story, and it's got that sense of no hope at it when you first come into it, because you really are in a rundown situation. The caretakers are up against it. The Kangs are there, and it is an abstract view of life in what would have been seen as the inner city type tower block rises back there in the 80s. And I think it's very true and very real in the way that it's telling the story. You've got a brilliant cast in this. I'm going to question Richard Briers, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And, in reality, you've got your main cast, I think, that are really settling into this. Sylvester's found his feet now, and he's starting to run well. Bonnie is off again, doing her own thing for most of this story. They only come back together again towards the end, and you've just got a really simple story that just unfolds itself very, very simply as it comes through. And it struck me when I watched it this time out, actually, it's a little bit of a macro terror feel to it, with this sort of secret in the basement, and you don't know what's going on down there to start with. So I like this story. I think there's a lot going for it.
Just okay. If anyone can explain this for me, I'd be happy to take the guidance. chief caretaker doesn't know that Croagnon's in the basement. When he goes down there, he goes, "I am Croagnon," and he's like, "Oh, blimey, I didn't know that's who was in the basement, right?" So why has he been allowing them to whatever's in there to kill all the Kangs and the caretakers? What's he aiming to do with that?
Yeah, it's a little bit odd because it's never really explained that I liken it to something like Little Shop of Horrors, where Seymour finds the tiny little plant at the beginning, and then the plant, starts feeding it blood and everything, and it grows. And that, in my head, that's what I always thought it was. So that Croagnon or whatever it was, he found himself in this basement, and the chief caretaker, not knowing who he was, has been sort of trying to nurture him, building him back to health. And it's become more, I want bodies now, and the cleaners have started taking over.
But doesn't Croagnon want a body to take over, and then he decides, actually, I'll have the chief caretaker. Which, if he'd have just done that at the start, rather than killing everyone else, would have been free a lot sooner.
He might not have had enough energy to do whatever it is he did to transfer over.
Where's the energy coming from?
I don't know. From what he's eating. Or what
I
he's
feel it's
consuming.
probably about 30 years too late to be asking these questions, and Andrew Carmichael should ask them then. I don't know. There's just big lumps of this. So I just think I don't know that. So everybody went to war and left them with a turret. Everyone that wasn't a young girl, presumably actual children at that point, because they were only meant to be like 20 there. So, and Tabby and Tilda talk about them all going off to this war as if it was so long ago, it's generations have passed, but it must only be about 20 years. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the Kangs. And then, so everybody that wasn't a caretaker, if you don't stop and think about it, it's nice.
It's a great story.
And you got these, but if you stop and try and think, so everybody that didn't want to become a caretaker or wasn't like 5 years old to grow into a feral Kang, or a really old person, but then they wouldn't have been really old when they went away, because do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
the Rezzies wouldn't have been old; they'd have been old enough to go to war.
But again, it's one of those stories when you start to think about it, you start picking up one thread, and then several, fall apart. I don't know. I don't know whether it was ever explained in any detail or any novel. But
there's a comic book spin-off, so it probably is now.
Yeah, I mean, part of me always thought that all the sort of young people, not the young people, because the children are still there as the Kangs, but all the young men and the sort of men that weren't caretakers could potentially have been sent off to fight this war on false grounds, or the ship was blown up or something, as he wanted to get them out of the building. But it's never explained. And we might be digging into this too deeply.
The Kangs, they're not boys, are. There are caretakers, there are Rezzies, there are Kangs, and there are what the neon lights in the basement. I think this time round I'm probably in a grumpy old mood now. But I think, because I was trying to divert from so many brilliant actors getting it so terribly wrong.
Yeah.
I think I focused on the logic and it does my. I mean, whilst I'm on this, the Doctor, who can go anywhere in time and space, great TARDIS. He can think of 2 swimming pools that you can take Mel to. One which is got killer crabs in it or something, or the one in Paradise Towers. The one in Paradise Towers is crappier than my local glaze. It's not a good pool. We've got a water slide thing in town now. I mean, Mel would shit the bed if she saw that. She gets to the top of that lift. She's like, "Oh, the pool! It's not even as nice as the pool in Heidi High. What is the problem with that?" You expect it to be this beautiful kind of thing with the slides and fountains and it's just and then like the pool from Birds with a Feather.
And then when you see Bonnie talking about it, it was freezing cold. She hated it, so it wasn't even a nice pool.
You do get to see the footage on the Blu-ray should you wish to watch a lot of the location filming.
It's quite. She hated it.
I mean, why didn't you take her to Florana? It's effervescent there. Nuts and salts. Forgotten already. But yeah, do you know what? I think it's easy to say to people, and I'm going to get in trouble. It's probably easy to say to people I think who get it really right in this. And I think the Resis is quite funny in its own little way, the campness of it. Would it have been funnier if they'd have played it straighter and then gone dark? I think so, actually. And I think we can all, and again, as a camp old queen, I can embrace this Briggs and Brenda, and that is funny. And I can go, I love how camp that is. But oh my gosh, if they'd have played that just straight and then turned really nasty with it, that would have had such an impact rather than this kind of panto height.
Would that have been too scary for children, though?
Would you? No.
No, I think
make the little cherubs scared.
It would have gone. I think it would have gone over their heads a little bit. I mean, I think there's enough scary visuals in this story for the little ones who would have been watching at the time. So, you're going to pick up on the subtleties of the characterization of Tabby and Tilda. Obviously, the older you are. So, yeah, you're right. And I agree with you, Paul, on this. I think if it had been played with a level of, if it had been played a little straighter with the menace only becoming apparent and only creeping out as it comes through, I agree with you. I think it would have been slightly more sinister. There is a charm in the way that it is played, though.
There is. I like their interactions with Mel. Whether or not Mel would be, captured in a shawl that they threw over her. It's the flimsiest of.
She's only little, though.
She is only little, yeah. And she'd just eaten a massive chocolate biscuit or whatever it was. It's massive. And why do they need to eat Mel when they've got these huge, great big cookies? It's not like you're starving, for crying out loud. She's pouring the cream on. But I still like the fact that you've got this like cozy setting, these two lovely old ladies, and they turn out to be, cannibals. I like that. Do we want to talk about Richard Briers now, or do we want to wait?
The interesting thing I thought in context with this, and again, I'm not speaking ill of The Departed. Nick Mallett does a fine job, I think, on Mysterious. He does a fine job with this. He does an excellent job with Fenric. But what you notice, I think, with the first two, he misfires horrendously with Joan Sims in The Mysterious Planet by not telling her what to do.
Oh yeah, that was
misfires horrendously with Richard Briers on this one. So it's kind of third time lucky when Nick Parsons comes along, and it's almost like either he's told him how to play or Nick has played it that way. And I don't know to what extent it's the director saying, "Okay, just play it like it's a drama." I can see that Joan would have given a fantastic performance if she'd have known where she was at. I don't have any doubts that Richard Briers, who was a tremendous actor, couldn't have done this. And I just feel slightly like maybe they thought, shit, Richard Briers has actually said yes. I know they asked the Quarks, but he's actually said yes. And so how do we direct him? Do we not? Is Richard Briers, are we allowed, can we tell him how to play this? And I think if someone had just said to him, just play it straight down the line. It's I think the sort of portrayal of the caretaker's all right. It's sort of in keeping with the annoying Job Smith kind of vibe. But as soon as he gets to doing the correct on, it's no. Roll credits. We're done with that.
No, I mean, this is a great example for me that this is stunt casting and it's gone wrong. And we've talked a lot about this in a number of the presentations we've done, and there are great examples of where stunt casting worked really well in this season. There are great examples where it doesn't, and I think you're right. They were unable to get out of him what they needed for that role, or he simply just didn't understand it. And he's such a brilliant actor in so many of the other things that he's in, but he just misses the point. And then he goes horribly over the top. at the end, and it almost becomes a little unwatchable, which is a shame.
So I quite like his chief caretaker. He's quite snidey. He's quite, quite vicious. And, he's like, oh, hell, the great architect, kill him. He's kind of, I quite like that. But you're absolutely right. There needed to be more contrast between, him as the great, as the caretaker, and then him as Cragnon. There needed to be something more than just hammy acting and a silver spray to distinguish the two, and that's a real shame, because I started my review by saying it's a great cast. It is a great cast. To get Richard Briers into Doctor Who, they must, like you say, they must have just like fallen off their desk going, oh my god, he said yes. But was it because he was like, this is how I'm going to play it, and they all just went, it's Richard Briers, so we just trust him, or not? I don't know. But it is, for me, lots of elements about the story I like, but this is where I really struggle. That your villain, and that's before you start picking at the threads of why has he been in the basement and what's happened to everybody else in the building. The villain just isn't good enough. It's just not. And I hate saying that because I love Richard Briers, and I can't think of many performances I've seen him in that I didn't like. But in this, I sort of liked the first part, disliked the second. I think Clive, does a really good job. And he's quite sparky, and he how he stood there when he's doing his performance as Cragnon and didn't just go, what are you doing? Just there's points where you can see he's smiling. Richard Briers is like, rah, 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 and his face is just like, oh, can't smile. But I think there are good performances, like you say, from the cast, the usual cast. There are some good performances from some of the others, but it is let down by this, and it makes me feel bad saying that because I love Richard Briers.
So let's lighten things. Let's do a little trivia quiz and see whether you can get this now. What TV show links Paradise Towers and Army of Ghosts?
Ooh,
he's checking the notes now.
I am checking the notes because
I was going to say, I'm surprised Stato hasn't got this tucked away under his notes yet.
It's quite an obscure one, really.
I know. It's one of the Kangs. One of the Kangs. No, wasn't someone didn't? Oh,
yeah. Nishanaya is in. She's in
the Weakest Link thing, isn't she?
No,
she's Bad Wolf.
She's in Bad Wolf, Passing the Ways, but she's not in Army of Ghosts. Army of Ghosts features Derek Akora, a psychic medium from Most Haunted, and one of the caretakers in Paradise Towers is Fred Batt, who is also a psychic medium on Most Haunted.
Okay. Mm.
Well,
in fact, I've actually emailed with Fred about this, but yes, it's a genuine thing. He's there. I've not quite spotted him, but he is in there.
And I was going to guess it was something to do with the Quarks.
Well, normally it is, but I know that one of the Kangs was in Bad Wolf, wasn't she? She had a cameo as a.
She's the station operator.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So on the subject of Kangs, what do we make of the Kangs, and which Kangs are best?
Oh. The yellow Kangs, they're unalive.
Jason's a red Kang, is he?
I'm a red Kang.
I always had Jason pinned down as a Resi.
with his toasting fork at the ready.
He'd turn Mel into a pint of craft ale, wouldn't he? He wouldn't toast her. He'd ferment her. So yeah, the Kangs give very unique performances in the story. It's an interesting take on the sort of thing, but there are moments where it feels brilliant, and there are moments where I sort of want to scratch my legs with embarrassment, and it's like and it's just a straight 50-50, I suppose. It's nice that there's an attempt to do different patterns and different speech patterns, and you know, high fabian and ice hot and things of that nature.
There is a sort of feeling that they've almost grown up feral, isn't there? They were there as probably as, you know, toddlers or very young.
How
children.
did they grow up as toddlers though? What happened?
I know. Well, the Rezzies when they weren't eating them were looking after them, maybe.
I don't get the history of it.
Because they're almost devolved, aren't they? Because their speech patterns, like you say, and their behaviour is very tribalistic. It's kind of Lord of the Flies. We've just left these kids in this tower, and they've created their own sort of little tribes based on colours. I don't mind them so much. I think it's one of those stories, and you see this replicated in other stories where, you know, the Doctor arrives in a situation where everybody there is against each other. So you've got the Kangs who are against each other. They're against the caretakers are against the Rezzies. And you get to that point, you know, when they all meet up in the swimming pool, where the Doctor gets them all together and to work for a common cause. I will just say, though, there is in the extended version on the Blu-ray, there is a very weird sequence where Sylvester McCoy is looking at Judy Cornwell, and it seems to go on forever. He like smiles and she smiles, and then he smiles and then she smiles, and then it's like a wink. And I'm like, is there something going on between these two characters that I'm unaware of? I've never seen this bit before. It seems to go on for ages. It's very odd.
Yeah, I wonder why it was cut. And also, I mean, not to keep just saying horrible things, and I'm not Nina Mitchkov, honestly, but that bit as well, and this is another bit really makes me a bit, is when Judy Cornwell's still with Judy and she points to the robot, she goes, I think you missed something down there, and it turns around and she drops, she goes, charge, and they just throw that bit of old net over it that you can clearly see through, and then the Kangs, having not considered before of just shooting these things, shoot it, and it just blows up and falls. Why weren't they shooting it before and they were all getting made unalive? Sorry.
Oh. And we haven't talked about
hate here, aren't they?
We haven't talked about Pex. Poor Pex. I mean, he knocks down the door and he kills Cragnon. And the rest of the time he's a bit pointless. Bless him.
He's very serious in the recording, though. He's quite method in the recording footage to break out of character. Yeah, it's interesting because I suppose the character, I think, is quite a nice thought, really, that he's obviously meant to look like he's Rambo. Doesn't quite look like Rambo. He's meant to look like he's Rambo. And yet the truth is he's a massive cowardly cutlet. So I like it's a nice idea, it's a nice character. I like the idea. That's what I'm saying on that. He's the agent for Heather from EastEnders, if that helps anyone out there.
Oh, well, there's a claim to fame there, isn't there?
That's a Christmas party and a half, isn't it?
That's worthy stat for you, that is, James.
He's just writing on Howard, agent for Heather from EastEnders and two
Quarks.
Yeah, I know we discussed it slightly earlier. I do remember being scared of the cleaners, but in reality, when you watch it, there's a lot of people throwing themselves at claws, and they as is ever this thing, you make these monsters to look like something, but they don't practically make a lot of sense, do they? They don't. The drill and things. It looks lovely. I remember seeing it at Longleat, and it looked lovely in the flash, but doesn't. You can see why the robot cleaners aren't something again that we've look, it's the cleaners. Because what the heck are they cleaning up with those appendages?
There must be one with a Hoover. There must be.
You'd hope, wouldn't you? But then wouldn't that be much more gruesome that he hoovered people to death and just sort of 60s? No, it's just slightly limp.
That'll be the sequel to Paradise Towers.
I was going to say, that's them tricky resis, isn't it, for you?
Mm.
So, are we heading to a score on the Paradise Towers?
Mm.
Is it high Fabtion? Okay, so let's go to James then. Where are you at with Paradise Towers?
So, yeah, I like the story. I really struggle with the Cro-Magnon, and for me, it didn't quite hit the mark. So I scored this a solid 7.
Solid 7. We don't get shaky 7s, do we?
No.
Shaky 6, maybe.
A shaky 6, I'd say, yeah. You do get a shaky
Stephen to the next one.
A solid 7.
So, Jason, where are you at with the Paradise Towers?
Okay, so this is definitely the Eric Sarwood era being brought to a close. And this story for me is setting a direction of travel for the darker stories of the future. I think Andrew Cartmel is starting to get his mark now. I thought the story is a good one. I think, yes, you can sit there and you can look at plot points and take a different level. I have basically just watched this and I've pretty much just enjoyed it for some of the humor. Darkness is a good part to this, and again, just a simple, straightforward story for me in the way that I watched. I think we all watch it differently, which I think is a great thing. Great script, some great cast, a couple of notable exceptions, some great cast, and I think the Doctor and Mel are coming into their own in this. So it's an improvement over the last story. As I said, I think everything continues to improve as we come through this season. So I'm going to go in with, it's not a shaky, but I am going to go in with a 6 out of 10.
Ooh. You see what he's doing? He's building high for happiness. He's starting low and he's just gently increasing.
Can't wait for the peak. Okay. I think I've said quite a lot about what I think about Paradise Towers. So the Yellow Kangs are unalive. I'm going to give it 5.
Ooh.
Boom. I just, do you know what? I think it's a slight step down from Time in the Rani. Actually, no, it's a little bit of a stumble. There's a lot there that could be so much better than it is.
Yeah.
I feel a little upset at the wasted potential on how it could have come to screen. And I like the story, and I like the idea, I like the concept, I like a lot about it, but it just feels like it's not been executed properly. So
it's a bit panto, I think is the...
Who doesn't love a panto? Well, that means at the end of part 1, Time in the Rani is currently our leader with 20 points, and Paradise Towers just behind it on 18, but it could all change, and we'll be back in part 2.